Throughout evolution, we had to work for our food. We expended energy to get our food, and we had a varied diet. Today, probably the most dangerous thing we do is eat. Epidemiologic studies in the 1960s and early 1970s found a link between fat and cholesterol in our diet and the prevalence of heart attacks, strokes, and death. That led to the food guidelines in the late 1970s recommending a lowering of fat and cholesterol in our diet by decreasing the amount of meat, eggs, and butter and other food types that are in our diet. And then in 1994, a Scandinavian study came out that showed for the first time that patients on a cholesterol-lowering drug like a statin had lower rates of death, heart attack, and stroke, which significantly accelerated the recommendation that we go to a low-fat, low-cholesterol diet. So under the law of unintended consequences, organizations like the American Heart Association started recommending specific food choices and diets. The food companies moved from fat and cholesterol to sugar because they wanted us to have foods we wanted to eat. And with the prevalence of processed foods in our diet, which ultimately increased the amount of sugar we absorb, led to a significant increase overall of sugar and sweets in our diet. The medical impact of the low-fat craze was actually a significant increase in obesity in America. Following those early guideline recommendations, we see that the number of patients with obesity in the United States significantly accelerated and increased through the 1990s and well into the 2000s. As people became more obese, there was an increased development of type 2 diabetes in the American population, which frankly in the 2000s is becoming an epidemic. What we know is diabetes is a risk equivalent for heart disease. What's that mean? What it means is if you're a diabetic, you have the same risk over 7 years of having a heart attack as somebody who's already had a heart attack. So diabetes is a risk equivalent and a very significant risk factor for heart disease. One of the most fascinating things we've learned in the last 20 years is that diets rich in sugar also drive cancer risk and ultimately lead to the more aggressive growth of tumors in patients with cancer and ultimately worse outcomes. Consumers have tried to get sugar out of their diet through the use of sugar substitutes. There's a lot of challenges with sugar substitutes. One is they don't taste good, and therefore we tend to overeat, seeking and craving sugar. People are incredibly confused about diets. They hear about an Atkins diet that has no sugar, or vegetarian, or Weight Watchers, or South Beach diet. And what they need to understand is all these diets are ultimately trying to lower insulin levels by taking foods that are low glycemic, which means the blood sugar doesn't go up, the pancreas doesn't respond by releasing insulin. And ultimately what consumers need to understand isn't about the calories on the package, isn't about the fat content or the sugar content. It's really about the glycemic index of the foods. So let's be honest, Americans are not going to give up sweet food. So what is the future of sweet foods? I think Sola is a great example of what we can expect. It's a mixture of sweeteners that are found in nature that have been blended. It has the same volume and sweetness of sugar. Foods baked with Sola brown, just like we're used to. And consumers can expect to have the same sweetness as they get with sugar. The benefit of a diet sweetened with Sola is its zero glycemic index. It does not increase blood sugars, it does not cause insulin release, and it does not have the adverse effects that sugar does. Sola has developed food products that not only take advantage of the zero glycemic index of the sweetener, but they have also optimized the recipes in order to minimize the sugars and carbohydrates in their food products. If we don't get our heads around the growing diabetes and obesity epidemic that we're facing, we're going to have more and more heart disease, more and more cancer, and we're going to drive our healthcare costs higher and higher. Consumers can take better control of their food choices, number one, by cooking for themselves and shopping for themselves. Number two, by being educated, understanding what the glycemic index means. It's not a new concept, but it's becoming more and more prevalent in our culture as nutritionists, diabetologists, and scientists begin to understand what really drives weight gain, obesity, and the risk for diabetes. Sola was developed to give people the opportunity to eat low glycemic food without giving up taste. I want to thank you for your time and interest, and don't forget to get your gift bags as you leave today that contain samples of Sola products. And we're happy to work with local healthcare providers and organizations to improve the outcomes of your patients through the implementation of a low glycemic approach.